Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 6:30, and I will call this regular meeting of the Burnsville City Council to order. It is our tradition to stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have announcements for our upcoming meetings. Regular council meetings are scheduled for Tuesday, September 5th, and Tuesday, September 19th at 6:30 p.m. We have a work session that's scheduled for Tuesday, September 12th at 6:30 p.m. And we have a governance meeting that's scheduled for Tuesday, September 5th at 6:30 p.m. and Tuesday, September 19th at 6:30 p.m. We also have a meeting that's called the Mayor's Challenge Idea Accelerator Workshop that's scheduled for Tuesday, September 11th at 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. I believe that's Monday.
Yes.
Yeah, not Tuesday.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, it's Monday, September 11th at 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then we are in the midst of budgets. And so our truth and taxation meetings are scheduled to adopt the maximum tax levy is Tuesday, September 5th at 6:30 p.m. Department budget presentations are scheduled for Tuesday, October 24th at 6:30 p.m. We have a budget work session that's scheduled for Tuesday, November 14th at 6:30 p.m. Another budget work session scheduled for Tuesday, November 28th at 6:30 p.m. And then we adopt the budget and the levy on Tuesday, December 5th at 6:30 p.m. Those are the announcements. And now, it is my great pleasure and honor to invite our police chief and fire chief, Police Chief Eric Giesecke, and Fire Chief B.J. Jungman. This has to do with recognition awards. Chief Giesecke.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thanks so much for allowing me the opportunity to work with the fire chief in just a minute to present some awards for some exceptional police work and fire work that occurred over the summer. But before we do that, and to our viewing audience, we want to take the opportunity to recognize a very special individual, a resident of Burnsville, who really demonstrated some amazing courage last November and really helped us with a very difficult case. And it's not too often that we give out citizen accommodations, but we're going to do that tonight. And at this time, I'd like to ask Erin Stewart, if you'd please come up here. I promised her she wouldn't have to say anything. You would be so kind to stand right next to me here. I'm going to read off the award. And I also like to recognize the fact Detective Andrea Newton, as she's going to assist me with giving out the award tonight. Also, she's very special and unique, and as you recall, last November we had an active shooter at the Dollar Tree in Burnsville resulting in a death. And she was the lead investigator in that case along with Casey Buck, and they did an exceptional job. She actually nominated Erin Stewart, and rightfully so. So it's my honor and privilege to have Detective Newton up here as well. So. On Monday, November 7th, 2016, at approximately 20:10 p.m., Erin Stewart was at the Dollar Tree shopping when she heard a scuffle coming from the rear of the store. Unbeknownst to her, Grant Hendrickson, a store employee, had been involved in an altercation, and Mr. Hendrickson was asked to leave. Erin observed Mr. Hendrickson exit the store, then re-enter the store in a short time later, at which time he fired a gun. Erin heard an additional gunshot as she exited the store. Mr. Hendrickson walked further into the store, where he ultimately fired the gun several more times, shooting and killing 69-year-old Donald Horsch, and shooting 26-year-old Singuez Davis. Singuez survived, but he suffered severe injuries and currently is paralyzed from the waist down as a result. Erin fled to the parking lot in her vehicle when she observed Mr. Hendrickson exit the store and enter a vehicle. Erin drove away from the Dollar Tree, realized she was directly behind Mr. Hendrickson's vehicle. Erin knew she needed to call 911. Hands shaking, she retrieved her cell phone and managed to call 911. While calling, Erin observed Mr. Hendrickson throw what she believed to be a gun outside of his vehicle. Erin stopped her vehicle near the discarded firearm and waited for the police to arrive while providing 911 dispatchers with the location of Mr. Hendrickson's fleeing vehicle. After officers arrived, Erin pointed out the location of the firearm. Subsequent analysis of the firearm confirmed it had been used to murder Donald Horsch and assault Cinquez Davis. Erin agreed to participate in a show-up where she identified Mr. Hendrickson, the suspect, and she had seen at the Dollar Tree. The selfless and courageous actions of Erin Stewart are something we can all learn from. Her actions resulted in the identification and apprehension of Mr. Hendrickson and the weapon used in this horrific crime. Erin is deserving of the highest recognition for her willingness to get involved and assist the Burnsville Police Department with this case, which ultimately led to the conviction of Mr. Hendrickson. Therefore, Erin Stewart, on behalf of the Burnsville Police Department, I commend you for your keen observation skills and willingness to assist in this incident. Despite the risk of personal injury to yourself, you displayed courage in a time of heated confrontation during this rapidly evolving situation. Thank you for helping to make Burnsville a safer community. You would agree with me, pretty amazing?
Oh, and courageous.
Next, I ask the Fire Chief, BJ Youngman, to come up, please. Now it's our pleasure as well to recognize good work by Burnsville officers and the fire department members who performed tremendously back in June. I'd like to ask Officer Paul Ulrich to come up first, please, if you wouldn't mind. I have to give a little special shout out to Officer Paul Ulrich. He doesn't like the attention, but it's important to note that the call the fire chief is going to discuss occurred this past summer. And what was unique about that, he was called to a medical, and the house he responded to is people he actually knows. Paula and Lonnie Wallace, members of community, longtime members of the community. And in addition to that, Paula was actually a recent graduate of the Citizens Academy, and she's a mobile volunteer network. So when Paul was the first to arrive on the scene, she knew him by his first name walking up the sidewalk, which I think is pretty darn special. So with that said, Paul, we appreciate all you do, appreciate what the fire department does. Going to hand it over to the chief to give out the awards.
Thank you. Thanks for the time today to recognize the important work that's being done. Just to give you some context, sudden cardiac arrest strikes over 350,000 Americans each year and affects people of all ages who can previously be healthy and suddenly collapse. Nationally, the survival rate is about 12%. We average approximately 30 sudden cardiac arrest events per year in the city of Burnsville. In 2016, our survival rate was about 10%, and we had 2 victims survive sudden cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest survival requires coordination, a coordinated approach from bystanders recognizing that the cardiac arrest is occurring and calling CPR and providing CPR and using AEDs. First responders like the police department are an integral piece to making sure that CPR is provided and defibrillation is given in a timely event. Then we also need to provide advanced life support care from paramedics in close coordination with area hospitals such as Fairview Ridges and Fairview Southdale to care for these very complex patients. And you're going to see that this occurred in this incident. On June 21st, 2017, the police and fire department were dispatched to a resident for a possible cardiac arrest. Little did we all know that the victim was going to be someone that we knew. As Chief Gieske pointed out, it was the husband of one of our mobile volunteer network volunteers. First to arrive was Officer Ulrich. He initially started CPR on the victim when he arrived and provided care initially. Shortly thereafter, the fire department staff arrived and provided advanced life support care. As a team between police and fire, they cared and revived the patient. The patient was then transported to the hospital and had made a full recovery. And thanks to the definitive efforts by his wife, the dispatchers, the police department and the fire department, and all of the hospital staff, Lonnie's here today with us. So I'd invite Paul and Lonnie to come up here with us as we provide these awards. And I'll just read we're going to present the life-saving award to the folks on the call. So Burnsville Fire Department Life Saving Award, on June 21st, there was a 911 call of a possible cardiac arrest. First arriving police officer found an unconscious, non-responsive male in his home and immediately began CPR. Once on scene, Burnsville paramedics began advanced life support assessment and care. The team successfully resuscitated the patient and transported to the hospital where he eventually made a full recovery. Therefore, Officer Paul Ulrich, for these life-saving actions that day, are hereby awarded the Burnsville Fire Department Life Saving Award. So I'd like to congratulate Officer Ulrich. Next, I'd invite up firefighter paramedic Chris Walker. And then firefighter paramedic Sam Butterfield. And fire captain paramedic Neil Dwyer. It's great to see when this all comes together. It's a great team when the community, police and fire respond together as a team, and we have successful outcomes like this. And it's great to capture those, and we appreciate the great work that gets done every day to take care of the citizens of Burnsville. So thank you, and great work to all of you.
Squeeze in a little bit more. All right. On three. 1, 2, 3. Take 2 more. And we're done. Thanks.
Thank you. Chief Giesecke and Chief Joman, thank you for your leadership and for the work that you both do together to collaborate and to keep Burnsville safe and working together. And to Mrs. Stewart, thank you so much for your courage. Because of what you did, someone who didn't belong in Burnsville but came in to do harm was captured and is no longer on the street to harm anyone else. So we thank you for that, because it takes all of us to keep Burnsville a safe community. And it is the actions of citizens like you. And I'm proud to say that when I lived on Manor, I was a neighbor, but they were on Drive and I was on Boulevard. And Mr. Stewart tells me that that was the better street. So thank you so much. And to all of our public safety staff and first responders, thank you so much. Your job is not easy, but you do it every day because you love this community. And I'm sure my fellow council members are grateful for the work that you do. Thank you so much. And now we continue with the work of the citizens of Burnsville. The next item is citizens' comments. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience to address the council on an item that is not on the printed agenda and not an application form that will be coming before us at a future date. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council? Anyone? Seeing no one, we will move on. The next item is for emergency items only, and this is additions to the final agenda. Ms. Johnston, are there any emergency items to be added to the agenda?
None from staff, Madam Mayor.
Members of the council? Okay, thank you. We now move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a group of items that's considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. However, an item can be removed from the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes an item on the consent agenda to be removed for a separate discussion and vote? Anyone in the audience? Seeing no one. Ms. Johnston?
None from staff, Madam Mayor.
Okay, members of the council? Members of the council, I am going to be pulling item I. And the reason I'm pulling I is to acknowledge the work of the Lions Club and their contributions in helping us with equipment that helps our firefighters. So I'm pulling I and may for a separate discussion and vote. And may I have a motion for the balance, please?
Motion to approve the consent agenda except for I.
Okay.
Second?
There is a motion by Councilmember Coughlin, second by Councilmember Schultz. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. Members of the council and citizens of Burnsville, this item is to purchase a fire department ambulance and stretcher power load system. And we're able to do this because of the generous contribution from our Burnsville Lions Club, who donated an additional $40,000 to retrofit an additional ambulance, ensuring that all fire department primary ambulances will be equipped with this technology. And so we're very appreciative of the Lions Club and their contribution to help us make sure that our fire department has the equipment they need to address all of these calls and in our community. So, members of the council, that was all I wanted to do, and the chief is here, and I'm proud to tell you that we have Assistant Fire Chief Brian Carlson is also a Lions, Captain Jeff Banke, and Officer Christina Mezarek is also a Lions. So we have four of us who are from our organization as part of the Lions Club, and we're very appreciative of their generosity. So may I have a motion to adopt I, please?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Councilmember Keeley makes a motion, second by Councilmember Coughlin. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, and the item is approved. Thank you so much, and thank you, Chief. Thank you, Assistant Chief Carlson. And we move on to the regular agenda. The first item on the regular agenda is an appeal of Wang Ping Wang for denial of a massage license renewal. Our attorney, Mr. Jamnick, is presenting this item. Mr. Jamnick.
Mayor and council, as the agenda item indicates, this is an appeal requested for a denial of the massage license, both enterprise and individual license. Staff had reviewed and recommended denial and informed the applicant of the staff's opinion. Pursuant to our ordinance, the applicant requested the forming of an administrative appeal panel to review that. That appeal panel was conducted on June 27th. Has prepared findings and fact and a recommendation to the City Council. Since the recommendation has been formulated, the applicant has submitted additional information to supplement the record, and the council's been provided that as recently as the last several days after the council packet had been prepared. The purpose of the appeal tonight is to listen to the applicant, their representative, consider their concerns or their information provided to you, and then for the council to pass on the recommendation from the appeals panel.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jamnick. Any questions for Mr. Jamnick? Okay, thank you. We've read all of the documents that have been submitted to us and reviewed all of them, and I understand that Mr. Randall Tigliero? Sir? Time. Please come forward.
Mr. Streff is going to speak first and then
Okay, Mr. Strapp, because I just had one person sign in.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, Mr. Tyke signed in for both of us today.
Okay.
So, and we were going to be addressing slightly different issues related to the case, or at least slightly different perspectives related to this matter. So I appreciate very much the council's opportunity to allow us to speak today.
Give us your name again and the spelling.
Matthew Streff, Madam Mayor, it's Streff.
Okay. Thank you.
I do also have, if the council will permit, as you know, we've submitted a lot of documentation. If it is of interest to the council, I've provided basically the Cliff Notes, which I think are sort of the most.
Mr. Struff,
pertinent
you know we're
pieces.
acting tonight, and we don't have time to review all of that this evening.
All right, certainly.
I mean, when I'm looking
It's
at-
actually all included in the paperwork you have. so-
Well, then we don't need that.
Okay.
You should have saved a tree.
Sure. Certainly, Your Honor. Is Your Honor your preference?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor and members of the council, we're here today to address the denial of Ms. Huang's massage license, as you know, and I think that the two things that I would ask the council to consider, the two essential and key components here are the matters of public safety for the city of Burnsville, which we take very seriously and which Ms. Huang takes very seriously, and the countervailing right of a citizen of the city or a citizen of any of Minnesota to have the right to pursue their chosen profession. I'd like to speak in those broad strokes. Mr. Teague is going to speak about some of the more specifics related to some of the facts of this case. But I think it's important for the council to remember that the Constitution of the United States guarantees a person the right to pursue their chosen profession. If a government entity is going to deprive a person of that right, they have to do so in a manner that is narrowly tailored, that has a particular public purpose. And in this case, I believe that public purpose is certainly the public safety in the city of Burnsville. We very much appreciate the city's concerns about those matters. The city, in working with the administrative body, we did work with Mr. Brockle, the city's attorney, to try and look at a resolution where we could address those concerns. I would suggest that the agenda to the city gave three options. To either approve the administrative or approve the enterprise license, to approve the individual license, or to approve both, or to deny both, or to deny one. I would suggest that there is another option in this case that fulfills both the purposes of public safety and allows Ms. Huang to pursue her chosen profession. And that option would be to potentially put in place other types of guarantees that can meet those public safety and concerns of the city. I think that it is appropriate if the city finds that Ms. Huang has, in fact, committed any kind of violations of the city code that the city, I would ask the council to consider the possibility of potentially a fine or other punitive actions that would that would make sure that all of those interests are met. I think that currently if the city were to hold with the idea that denial of a license within 5 years of the denial of any license, that is overly punitive. The city has denied the present license generally for the fact that Ms. Huang had a previous denial from the city of Minneapolis. And I think that it's appropriate that the city examine that denial from the city of Minneapolis, and I think that denial certainly raises concerns. The denial from the city of Minneapolis was a result of some advertisements that Ms. Huang had put on Backpage.com. Those advertisements contained images of women in seductive positions. I would say they did not contain any nudity. And so my contention would be those advertisements were no worse than any Miley Cyrus video. Perhaps in poor taste, but Ms. Huang has taken those advertisements down, and I think she appreciates that in the state of Minnesota, more tasteful advertising is going to be better received by all involved. The other accusation was that she had provided unreasonable expectations for salary by saying that a person with a massage license can gain $7,000 a month. That is perhaps maybe an exaggeration, but it's not a completely unrealistic exaggeration. If one were to consider a $50 massage, a masseuse could do 5 massages in a day, and in a period of 28 days make that $7,000. Now that would be as an independent contractor, so it's not taking into account costs of the building, the rent, the materials, the advertisements that go into that business practice. So I think those were certainly concerns, but the city of Minneapolis went as far as to say that those were indications of sex trafficking. Now that's a very serious accusation. Sex trafficking involves the sale of young individuals, often minors, for sexual purposes, and it is gross, it is vile, it is disgusting. But to have the city of Minneapolis jump to the conclusion that some poor tasting ads and some unreasonable salary expectations rise to the level of sex trafficking is just beyond the pale and unreasonable. And so I would hope that in thinking about this case, that the city of Burnsville would consider that it does not want to replicate the overly harsh and completely unreasonable conclusions that the city of Minneapolis came to. And I think those underlying facts are important. Now, as a result of that denial of the application in the city of Minneapolis, Ms. Huang basically had a denial in the city of Burnsville because of the fact that the city of Burnsville has claimed that she had failed to report those denials. Now, I think that is really what is at the critical point here. And I think that it is not certainly a permissible or a good thing that she not, if the city council decides that she in fact did not report those appropriately. I would say that Ms. Huang did engage in efforts to fully disclose her business and operations to the city. She did in fact contact Ms. Tina Zink in October of 2016 to inform her of the Minneapolis violations so that she would be aware. And so, even if, there is a question of fact as to whether or not there was an application that included a specific checkmark place that Ms. Huang needed to check, indicating that she had a denial. The problem is that the city has not produced that application. Ms. Huang has unfortunately not a good recollection from 2016, from over a year ago, as to whether or not she submitted an actual application or did, as what is often done in the city of Burnsville, simply submitted her fee for reapplication. So the question, and therein lies, because of the fact that I think there are some issues of fact, I think we could, reasonably come to an accommodation where we could, again, work with the city of Burnsville to try and impose a fine so that Ms. Huang is fully, reprimanded for, or at least not if she fully understands that she needs to reach all compliance with the city's reporting for the city. In regards to the basic underpinning of the charges against her, I would say that that we could look into those facts, but the really important thing is that Ms. Huang has done at this point everything she can to try and produce to the city documentation showing that she is operating her business in good faith. And there was a discrepancy, I think, with the administrative panel. One of the issues is that Ms. Wang was actually in the process of having the business transferred from the previous owner, Mr. Patrick Orth. That transfer was actually not completed until this last Friday. I think that was a major concern for the panel. The panel also did actually, we did have an opportunity to give that significant information about the business. We were given until July 31st to give that information to the panel. The panel instead met on July 27th. And so did not take into consideration all of the information that we had provided to you, which we have now provided to the council here today. And so I would hope that the council would in thinking about the administrative panel's decision, consider the fact that at the point that they made that decision, they didn't quite have all of the facts. So at this point, Ms. Wang has provided all that information, and I think she has provided information that should fulfill the council's concerns about public safety. Now, the question then becomes, what do we do under the laws of the city of Burnsville? The laws of the city of Burnsville, the ordinance says that when submitting an application, the city administrator shall, which means they must approve an application unless certain conditions are met. One of those conditions includes that the person has had a denial of a license within the last 5 years. So that definitely says that if there is a denial within the last 5 years, there's a concern, and the city needs to address that. And the city administrator is absolved from his administrative burden, his or her, to immediately approve that petition. And I think that's where it puts us today. The statute does not prohibit the city council from approving a application for a massage license because of a denial within the last 5 years. I think if you really look at the spirit of that ordinance, I think that ordinance is basically asking for the type of hearing we're having today, for a more full investigation. I think if you look at that ordinance applied constitutionally, with the idea that you cannot, take away a person's livelihood without really investigating it, without doing it in a way that is really narrowly tailored to suit that public purpose, then I think that interpretation of the statute follows my suggestion that the city council has the power to approve that massage license. I think that it is, so I hope that addresses these things, address the city's concerns. I really would emphasize that, Ms. Wang has gone to school for massage. She's a business owner who has real estate property. She is here with her daughter today. She's a single mother who works very hard. She is a person who, who is very invested in her profession. She has talked to me about how she really enjoys the opportunity to help people who have pain through her work with massage, to help people who have stress through her work with massage. And those are things that I think are important, and I think that she can be a very positive and contributing member of the city of Burnsville. I think she can add a lot to this community. And I would ask the council really focus on that, and focus on the fact that she has really tried and made efforts to come into public compliance, and those efforts are reflective of the city's public safety concerns. I think that the city would be justified because of the fact that there have been some issues in this case. I think the city would be justified for imposing potentially some more strict guidelines on Ms. Wang's business, potentially looking at more frequent inspections. I've spoke with Mr. Brockel from the city's attorney's office about the possibility of looking at that option, and Ms. Wang has certainly agreed that she is happy to do what the city requires to meet the concerns of the city in terms of public safety. And so for those reasons, I would ask that the city please consider either approving both the enterprise and the individual license. Again, Ms. Wang has submitted the individual license, and she's made a request that the city convert the enterprise license to her name, reflecting the business transfer from Mr. Patrick Orth, which was finally finalized on Friday. We did submit information to the city that transition had been in process since approximately last October. And so, again, I think that at this point, Ms. Wang has really done, I mean, as you can see from the large amounts of documentation, really tried to, put forth her full position and everything about her business for your consideration to address any concerns that you have. And so, I think, would Mr. Teague like to come up and speak, or does the council member or Your Honor have any questions for me on
Not
those
at this
issues?
time. I don't think members of the council, do you have any questions for? Thank you. Mr. Teague.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Randall Teig. I'm also here. And first thing I want to do is tell you I appreciate the efforts of Mr. Streff. As many people have known it, I have many times made complex constitutional arguments with limited degree of success, but I think this case is resolvable on a much more simple basis. As Mr. Streff said, the ordinance said the city must grant the license unless one of several enumerated conditions are present. And I think to determine whether those conditions are present, you need to compare two different ordinances. The Burnsville ordinance has two separate licenses for massage. It has an enterprise license and an individual therapist license. They're separate licenses. They basically have the same criteria. Minneapolis, by contrast, licenses only the enterprise. The operative provision is Minneapolis Code of Ordinances, section 286.20, which says, no person shall engage in the business of operating a massage and bodywork establishment without being licensed under this chapter. It licenses only the enterprise. It does not license individual massage therapists. When Ms. Wong filled out her application, she was asked, have you ever been denied a massage therapist license? She never has, because the city of Minneapolis doesn't license massage therapists. She was directly or indirectly turned down on an enterprise license, but she wasn't turned down for a massage therapist license. So when she said, I have not been turned down for a therapist license, she was being absolutely truthful. Now, given the fact she truthfully said she wasn't turned down for a massage license, is she disqualified by the terms of the Burnsville Ordinance? And I would direct your attention to Burnsville Ordinance 3-15-3. That's the same ordinance that says the city manager must give a license. And among the reasons for being able to deny a license is an applicant or any employee or person associated with a business performing massage, this is subparagraph 7, and you skip down to subparagraph C, and it says, has had a massage therapist license revoked or denied by a state, city, or other licensing authority within the past 5 years. The only disqualifying factor is the denial of a massage therapist license. If the city wanted to impose a disqualification for a massage enterprise license, it should have written it into the ordinance. It is not there. So not only did Ms. Wong tell the truth when she said she'd never been denied a massage therapist license, the fact that she hasn't been denied a massage therapist license takes her out of the disqualifying provisions of the ordinance. So even conceding that she had massage enterprise licenses denied in Minneapolis, it does not fall within the purview of what disqualifies you for a license in Burnsville. If the city council wants the denial of a massage enterprise license in another jurisdiction to be a disqualifying factor, it should amend the ordinance to say so. But it isn't there now, and Ms. Wong deserves her license. The only other thing I would ask is if the council denies the license, it stay its denial pending judicial review, because we will certainly seek it.
Thank you, Mr. Teig. Mr. Jamnik and Mr. Brokaw, we have heard arguments from Mr. Struff and Mr. Teig with regard to Ms. Wang's license. And they both talk about our ordinance and our denial based on the failure to report the denial from Minneapolis. Can we get to that two pieces first before we get to the individual license? The difference between the Minneapolis enterprise license and the individual license.
Well, Mayor and Council, the City of Burnsville regulates massage therapists in various ways. The goal is to make sure that the therapists are trained adequately, can provide the services that they advertise and contract with, that the premises are in a clean, healthy, safe condition, and that the massage is delivered in a legal manner, that it is not a front for prostitution, that it is not an improper act. And toward that last point, because of the nature of the service, unlike many other businesses, this service has to be basically provided behind closed doors. And so the level of trust that this council has to have regarding an operator of either an enterprise or the individual therapist is quite high. And it is a local ordinance. It's not a statewide profession license like a law license or a medical doctor's license. It is whether or not the individual is qualified under the city ordinance to operate either as an enterprise or as an individual. And Ms. Wang's appeal and application today deals with both of those. And it's for the council to determine whether or not you have the confidence in the background and qualifications and characteristics of the applicant to provide that service under our regulated environment. The city staff and the appeal panel has recommended you no, and it's for your decision tonight whether you agree with them or whether you're persuaded by the applicant that there is just a misunderstanding, or that while there's substantial issues, they don't rise to the level of non-qualification or a basis for denial.
Members of the council, any questions from Mr. Jamnik or Mr. Struff? Yes, Councilmember Schultz.
I have a question. So regarding the question over the shall language and saying that we have to approve unless, and he brought up the information that on that sheet, it talks about the individual license denial, which she was not denied an individual license, she was denied an enterprise license. In your opinion, is she covered by that shall or not?
No.
Why?
The license application that we have is for denial of a therapist license. It's broadly worded. If you have a denial, we require the disclosure. Obviously, applicants don't want to disclose or be forthcoming if they think there's going to be a basis of the denial. Ultimately, the decision is for the council to whether or not the license gets issued. The manager shall issue unless they make a determination that there's a basis for the non-denial, or for denial, or non-issuance. The applicant has the right then to seek a review of that of the administrative panel. But if the manager makes a determination that all the qualifications are met, they would issue the license, and that's the shall part of it. But if they make a determination that any of those factors within the ordinance are present, that ends the mandate of shall issue. But the council has the discretion, if you wish, to issue the license. Mr. Streff is exactly correct. The fact that there's a basis for the denial doesn't prevent the city, if you have confidence in the applicant, to issue the license in spite of the fact of having been denied by another jurisdiction. It's within your authority to issue the license ultimately.
Thank you.
Okay. Members of the council, your thoughts, your remarks before we get to Councilmember Keeley? Use your pads so I can put you all on cue.
Just a clarifying question. The applicant is applying for an individual massage license or
And
an
an
enterprise?
Both,
And an enterprise.
yeah.
Was there a determination based on the background work done that identified which of those two was the basis, or both of those two license applications were the reasons for denial, put it that way?
Both.
Okay. And that basis was that decision was based on information gathered in the process of background and/or research and/or the information on the application itself and cross-referencing.
And
that
at the
with-
administrative panel hearing itself, there was other information. So the information in the record that formed the basis for the panel's recommendation is cumulative. It's from the applications, it's from the conversations, it's an entire exhaustive record. And as Mr. Streff indicated, there are many issues involved in there, any one of which, could be explained, but one of the issues here is there are many issues.
Thank you.
Okay.
May I provide one clarification?
One moment. The council is now, and I will get to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schultz.
I think in order to take away someone's livelihood, the threshold needs to be exceedingly high. And just to cut to the meat of it, she hasn't been arrested for prostitution. And that's kind of what we're stepping around is, do we think she's a prostitute or not? Or do we think she's a massage therapist? And she hasn't been arrested, she doesn't have a record in that. I don't see applying that label to her without some type of criminal activity that we've seen or can show or can point to. So I would have a very hard time denying her a license. If something comes up later, then you deal with it. But basically, accusing someone of a crime before a crime has happened is not something I'm going to do, and I'm not prepared to take away someone's livelihood based on that, based on supposition, guesses. I can't do that.
Councilmember Gustafson.
Under our ordinance, if you're a licensed massage therapist, do you have to work for an enterprise? Or does that allow you to just open up a business and do it?
It should be the enterprise. The massage therapist license includes the individual therapist so that you are operating as a business, holding yourself out as a business enterprise within the city.
But they're kind of asking for, don't deny one and deny another, we're back and forth. If we just let her have her therapist license, does she have to get a job with an enterprise in town to actually operate here?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Coughlin.
I just want to make clear, I have a lot of respect for Councilmember Schultz, but that's not how I view the law. What I'm looking at is the finds of fact, conclusions, and final decision of the panel. that included, among others, the Burnsville Police Department, head of our planning commission, and one of our top staff people. And while there's been some additional alleged facts and argument, and I've reviewed this entire record, I am paying particular attention to all of the findings and conclusions of that particular committee and that panel, and that applied to both the individual and the enterprise. And again, that's a different issue or evaluation than Councilmember Schultz stated. So I see the issue differently than Ms. Schultz, than Councilmember Schultz does. Thank
Okay.
you.
Mr. Streff, you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would just briefly provide a point of clarification on the decision of the administrative panel. The administrative panel and I had negotiated to give us until the 31st of July to provide all of the information to the panel. And the panel instead had made the decision on July 27th. And so again, I think the thing, and going again to Mr. Coughlin's point about the concerns of the panel about not having all of the information, the panel did not give Ms. Huang the full time it had previously told Ms. Huang it would allow her to provide all of the information. And so when the panel made its decision, it had not fully received all of the information that the council has here today. And so I would ask that the council take that into consideration and ask that the council color the findings of fact of the administrative panel in that light. And particularly, I think that the important thing to keep in mind here is that the information provided, Ms. Huang has, if the allegations are that she failed to provide information, she, however, has at all points tried to timely and relevantly update the city. And so I think that her efforts to do so I would ask the council to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jamnik.
Mayor and Council, the intent of the hearing tonight is not to get into a debate with the party, but I just would like to indicate that the panel's decision was a deadline that was based on able to operate during the pendency of the appeal and the consideration and to get the information to the panel so that it was done before the July 31st deadline. And so there's several requests during the pendency of where's the information, can you get the information to the panel? The deliberations were held on the 27th, but that was not because the deadline. So there's another issue or misunderstanding or argument that, in my opinion, is not based in the history and the record of that exchange. Further, the information regarding the transfer of the enterprise was last week, the 18th, 17th, not by July 31st. The information provided to the council in the last 3 or 4 days was not by July 31st or July 27th. We've allowed that in for the council to have a full and complete review so that the applicant can have a full and complete hearing based on what they want the council to consider. There's no desire on the part of staff to treat an applicant, regardless of the situation, unfairly or improperly. In fact, the deviation from standard practices is to the benefit of the applicant in this particular matter.
Okay. Mr. Jamnik, in the year that Ms. Wang has had her business here in Burnsville, have we had any calls or any complaints?
I'm not aware that staff has that information.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Mr. Forsland.
Madam Mayor, council members, we became aware of this situation based on a complaint from a resident who had some issues with people coming in and out of the establishment after hours, as well as the sign on the door
Yeah.
in the back.
I
Which-
believe I also heard that.
Yes, which we researched the phone number and came back to finding the findings of facts from the city of Minneapolis. We essentially stumbled across all this information, as well as some of the stuff that was advertised on back pages, Craigslist, some of the other ones.
Okay.
That's how that
Thank you.
pretty much evolved.
Yeah, okay. And Mr. Jamnick, because we have also in the past closed down 2 massage enterprises simply because they have also complaints and some activities that are not something that we want to encourage here in Burnsville, if you will.
That's correct, Mayor.
Yeah. All right. And I do appreciate that everyone has the right to practice their profession. And Ms. Wang lives in Edina, am I correct? If I look at all of the.
That's correct.
Yes, all of the submittal. And she tried to work in Minneapolis and was denied a license after the research that they did. And so one of the things that we do here in Burnsville is to make sure that public safety is adhered to, and good practices, and that businesses operate in good faith for the good of the clients that they serve. And members of the council, are you ready to make a decision? Ms. Schultz?
So in the past, we have closed down 2 massage parlors, correct?
Yes.
So if she were to operate her place, or say any massage therapist were to operate, and they were to operate in a way that broke our ordinance or broke law, we could then shut them down as well. Is that not correct?
Yes, the normal course in some of the issues would be a suspension or citation, but actual license revocation is always an option.
So there is a remedy in place already if a person were to engage in activities that are against the law. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So that would be something that is an option if we were to grant her license and something were to happen later. That is a remedy, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Keeley?
I think that, that there's really, well, I think there's plenty of evidence here that I would like to make a motion to uphold the recommendation by our review panel. But I would also say that I think Councilmember Schultz's concerns are valid, and that on behalf of the applicant, that the denial be stayed for judicial review, because I think there's the part about this that we wouldn't want to address at this dais needs to be addressed through a judicial process, where I think more of the background and facts would come out, and that's a more appropriate place for it than here. And so I would make a motion to support the denial with a stay of enforcement to allow judicial review, if that would be an appropriate motion. And I'll throw that to our city attorney to correct me if necessary on that motion.
Mr. Jamnick?
Mayor and council, the only concern I have is it's going to be an unclear situation of when the appeal would be
Yeah.
filed and how long the business can operate
Yeah.
with a extended license
Yeah,
or no license
yeah.
without actually filing of a judicial appeal. That,
Unless
Is
your
there-
motion
can
says
we-
it has to be within a certain.
A reasonable
three-
amount of time, right?
Not, well, what's reasonable? 3 months? 6 months?
A specific amount of time
Yes.
that is reasonable.
30
which-
days before they file.
Yeah. Do you want 30 days?
How long would it take, I'm getting good advice there. How long would it take before they would go to trial?
Depending on how they file the review, it could be a year or two. before final judicial resolution.
Which could also operate as a period of time for the applicant to prove themselves to operate a legitimate business within that period of time. But I guess the other alternative is just to, change my motion to support denial and allow the applicant to take the appropriate action that they deem necessary in response.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further comments? Seeing none, one of the things that, for me, is that the applicant, Ms. Wong, can have a place of another city that she can go to that doesn't have the kind of stringent review and also the culture that we have here. And, yep, you can go to court. No one is saying that you can't go down that road. So there's a motion and a second. Any further comments? With that, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose?
No.
And the clerk has a division at the House. Thank you. And I'm sorry, and we understand that you need to do this, but sometimes there has to be an understanding, Ms. Wong, of what you can do in advertising your business and what you can't do. So thank you. Your attorneys have spoken for you, and the subject is closed. We now move on to the next item on the agenda. And the next item on the agenda is item number 6, and this is for Dean and Barbara Johnson Holdings for a plan unit development amendment for a building and site modification and a drive-through located at 1404 County Road 42 West, and to approve the PUD amendment and adopt the findings of fact and ordinance. Ms. Regina Dean is our planner presenting this evening. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. This is before you as a result of a 3-2 vote by Planning Commission. The recommendation was for approval according to the conditions within the staff report. So before you today, you see a proposal for really a site amendment and a facade remodel to the existing building. The site exists as a plan unit development today. It was part of the Burn Hill PUD. And so it's a change to that. The specific location, it's at Irving and County Road 42 West. You may recognize the site as the current Precision Tune Auto Building. Surrounding zonings B3 PUD, it would be going to commercial as well. An overview of the site, showing the existing conditions, and a photo of the current building today. As described, it would be, the site would be reused for three new retail tenants, and also a drive-through would be proposed along the east and north part of the property. The three tenants include a drive-through use on the very west side of the property and 2 other retail tenants. The site would be modified to include a row of parking on the south portion of the property, as well as modifications to the existing retaining wall, moving that further south. There would also be a row of parking added in front of the building. Currently, there's garage doors for the service station for the Precision Tune. A number of deviations from code are requested as part of the plan unit development. Some of those include and I'll move to that, some changes to the building perimeter landscaping, pretty minor in nature, the percentage of green space, the amount of sidewalk space in front of the building, the lighting projection on the overall site, some window coverage, as well as the building material percentages, the amount of EFS along the bottom portion of the building, and wall signs above the roof line without a continuous parapet. Since the Planning Commission meeting, the applicant has made some minor modifications. Those aren't in front of you today, but they were included in a packet. Some of those changes include changes to the amount of EFS, as well as the site lighting, and an awning added to the north portion of the property where the drive-through is located. Staff has also modified one recommendation to allow some flexibility. As you go back to the site plan, as you can see, on the north part of the property, there is landscaping and there is a small retaining wall that's proposed. That would require some site modification to the property to the north and some off-site grading, which the neighboring property owner was not in support of. So to allow, again, some flexibility, staff has rewarded that condition to either, one, require permission from the property owner, or to adjust the site modifications so that they're entirely on the subject property.
And to date, they have not heard from Mr. Varan DeSoto.
Staff has not, I do not know if the applicant has. They are in the audience to further answer that.
Okay.
Of the staff recommended conditions and the planning commission recommended conditions, 3 of the conditions the applicant wanted to have more discussion about before council. Again, they are in the audience tonight and can speak to them. The 3 conditions to highlight are the request for additional decorative wall lighting, for the parapet to extend around the building, and that the parapet roof features include some type of treatment such as cornices. All of these are highlighted within our city code requirements as well as within our architectural guideline handout that we provide to applicants.
Yeah.
And since this is a PUD, the request from staff and the recommendation from council reflect
The Planning
PUD.
Commission.
They recommend the, what am I what am I trying to say? They're in line with the basically benefits for the city of Burnsville as a whole. They add to the building, they add to the architecture, and it would be consistent with how we would apply the code to other sites.
Okay.
With that, if there's any questions or if you want me to describe any other features of the property, I'm certainly here for questions. Again, the applicant does hope to address the council.
Well, it looks like an improvement in that building, and that building was put in place, as I was looking at the history of the building, it goes back to the 70s, am I correct?
The overall planning and development was in the 70s.
1984.
The actual building was in the 80s.
1984.
Correct.
Yeah. And so this is a change, but also adding 3 tenants rather than 1?
That's correct.
To the building, and so this is an improvement. Yeah, and they're doing some beautiful facade work that enhances that building and that corner on Irving and County Road 42. Yeah. Okay, and who from the applicant, yes, please come forward and give us your name and address for the record, please.
Mark Krogh, Java Properties, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have some questions for us?
No, I understood that you wanted to address us.
Oh, no, I was just here to answer any questions you have.
Okay, and with what staff has put in place for conditions 6, 7, and 8, you guys are okay with all of that?
Yes, we're fine with
And
that.
you're going to make the changes and the improvements that are being suggested?
I believe the changes are already made. But yeah, I mean, we're fine with all
Yeah.
those changes. Your latest version, I believe, does have those changes in it.
Okay,
Madam Mayor, it does not.
It does
No, I
not.
think we're still.
yeah, yeah. So
Oh,
that's,
that's the old version though, not the one that was sent to you today.
yeah.
Madam Mayor, if I may,
Yeah.
this afternoon, or late morning, we did receive an email from, I believe, the architect representing the applicant. And within that email was a set of revised elevations affecting the awning in front of the drive-through window, the ephes changed to, I believe, brick on the lower portion of the facade on the south elevation, as well as the comment that the site lighting would be changed.
So does
There
it meet the
was-
conditions, Ms. Dean?
No, it does not. There was reference in the letter stating that the applicant wanted to discuss the three
6,
items within
7,
the
and 8.
recommendation, and that was highlighted in red in the response letter.
Yeah. Okay,
We're fine with those.
Okay.
So they should have been in there if they weren't in there.
okay. You're going to comply with the conditions that are put
correct.
forth? Okay, great, thank you so much. Makes things easy. Yes, okay, thank you so much. So you will work with staff and make sure that the conditions with the approval are going to be met.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, any other questions for Ms. Dean? Councilmember Keely?
Sorry, not a question for Ms. Dean, just appreciate the investment in that building, in that area, obviously with the building and improvements going on with the strip center behind it,
Yeah.
slightly to the east, and hopefully some more development to the
Yeah.
west. This building is getting updated at a very timely
Yeah.
period in its life, and greatly welcomed, and thank you for agreeing to these additional comments. I'm sure your architect will get a note from you, and we'll get revised plans and be able to move forward.
Yeah, thank you, because with Ace, Hobby Lobby, and Aldi's, all new this year in that center on the north side, and then you're doing all of your improvements, really improves that whole shopping center, because the last couple of years was Chick-fil-A and Starbucks. So it's great, thank you so much. So if there are no other comments, a motion is in order.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Keely makes a motion, second by Councilmember Kaufman. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. Thank you so much, Ms. Dean. We now move on to item number 7. Item number 7 is a request by Xcel Energy for suspension of City Code 7-1-2, paragraph D1, to allow overnight construction activities in Tennessee Park. Mr. Albrecht, our Director of Public Works, is presenting. Mr. Albrecht.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to give a brief introduction and frame tonight's background, and then we have Michelle Swanson and David Butler are going to speak on behalf of Xcel, I believe, and we also have Brian Beam here too, our plant manager, who works very closely with the city. This item is before you because it's of some importance based on the operations and the services that the Black Dog Power Plant provides. We all understand that it provides electricity to a good portion of the Twin Cities, and it's a very important piece of public infrastructure. The council will recall earlier this year, we completed a construction agreement with Xcel for a new pipeline through Tennessee Park that's needed for the decommissioning of, or the commissioning of the new generators that are going to be at the plant. And as part of that agreement, we had worked out a construction time of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That was based on, I think, hope that things were going to be installed smoothly and that they weren't going to encounter significant issues during construction. Under the current city ordinance, we do not have staff level, or staff is not allowed to approve projects like this that are not in the public right-of-way that are emergency-type projects. The council will recall that a month or two ago, you addressed the city's ordinance related to businesses in commercial industrial districts and allowing some flexibility with their work hours. However, this is a different request. As this is not a business zoning district and the request is for 24 hours a day, it's not addressed in our ordinance, and that's why it's before you tonight. Our ordinance prohibits between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. these types of operations in a residential district. And so that is why they're before you tonight. So I think it's important to understand Xcel is going to explain why they're making this request, why it's important. They'll give you some details on the request, and I think they're also going to lay out what the impacts would be to the residents in that area and what they've done to outreach to those residents. And so with that, I'm going to invite Xcel up to the dais to present. They'll have to present from this location, and they've got a short PowerPoint to take you through the project. So.
And thank you, Mr. Albrecht, because you and I have sat down with neighborhood, the residents from the neighborhood because of what's going on. And for me, the biggest thing is that Xcel needs to humanize this experience by having face-to-face conversations with the people who are going to be impacted. And I'm looking forward to hearing that because they've been great partners throughout this whole experience. So,
Mr. Butler is going to do the presentation.
Mr. Butler, please. Oh, his PowerPoint is over here. Okay, very good.
Excellent.
Welcome, Mr. Butler.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve, very much. Good evening, council members, City of Burnsville residents. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks for allowing us to be here and to make this request. It's something that we understand the impacts, and it's not something that we take lightly, working that many hours. I am David Butler, the project manager for the natural gas line project. And I wanted to, again, walk you through the status of the project, and the timing, but also how we got here, and then what we plan to do and how we plan to mitigate this request that we have and the impacts. So, again, I just make sure it's clear why we're here, and that's to request these additional hours. We experienced many items that cause our schedule to be impacted, and we're pushing up against November 1st, which is a critical date for us. This is a date that it's going to impact our ability to restore and stabilize the park because we're getting into colder, into weather that's not ideal for planting and restoration. We get into construction in the winter timeframe. We also get into weather conditions that impact the community and impact the company and impact all of our customers. So we're really just trying to get the project completed as soon as possible. How we got here was several different factors that continue to impact the contractor. So we had a very wet spring and early summer that slowed and kind of pushed some of our critical path items a little further down our schedule. We also encountered some geological conditions in underground hard rock and boulders and cobble that really slowed a very difficult part of the project, which is underground boring, really slowed that process down. And then on top of that, we had some equipment and some tooling failures and some problems with some of our pieces of equipment that further impacted our schedule and caused us to step back and begin a slightly alternate path. So that dramatically affected our schedule. The work that is currently completed, we've got about 70% of the pipe installed and x-rayed and ready to be tied in, but we've got this bottleneck to get to the plant, which is directly under the lake. And at any point, if you guys have a question or something that needs to be clarified, please.
Just move ahead.
Excellent.
I'm watching.
Excellent.
Don't worry. I'm
So-
managing this.
The yellow line, that is, on the right-hand side, that is installed and complete to date. The black box on the right-hand side, that's the area that we're going to impact the community. That's a very small crew that's going to be set up in that small area. The left-hand side is a zoomed-in version of that black box. And the actual location is going to be the yellow square on the left-hand side. So with Ryan Peterson's help, we determined that 350-foot radius showed us about 32 homes that were in that impact area. And so realizing that the schedule is now very crucial and looking for that additional hours to work, we decided to reach out to the customers directly. So this past Friday, we went to each customer or each resident and door to door and spoke to them directly. And if they weren't home, we left a letter of explanation and kind of explained.
How many did you meet in person?
Michelle?
16 were home.
16 were home and the rest were left.
I will recommend to you that you have face-to-face conversations with them because it's not you that they're going to be calling. It's me and members of the council and our staff that they'll be calling. So it's a partnership,
Yes.
and it's the quality of life for those folks. And you're going to impacting their sleep for how many days,
We're asking
nights?
for a 14-day window.
It's important that you speak to them and humanize this experience. And I know, Ms. Swanson, that you understand that, and Mr. Bean, I work with Mr. Bean often, and this is important.
Yes.
Okay.
And we also realize that we've been there for quite a long time and have had nothing but excellent partnership with the city, but also those residents that we're very close to. So, and we realize the fatigue that they see, and it's been a long summer. And so that also causes just, that impact is very clear to us.
Yeah.
So, and as far as while I've got this slide up, this bottleneck from the plant, that red line,
Yeah.
to the black box, our crews can't proceed because the heavy equipment's at the plant.
Yeah.
Doing the boring. So we really have to get this piece in to free up the rest of the work and do our testing. And that's why we're looking to get this suspension. As far as the timing goes, we have, the first step is the pilot to get across to get to that exit pit. And so that work is happening right now. It's a 24-hour schedule right now. And all that work is inside the plant. Once we get to that exit pit, then we need a small crew there to monitor that exit pit. And when they ream back and open that hole wider, there's a crew that has to add tail string. And it's a very simple operation. And so we've got scheduled a three-man crew or three-person crew to manage that tail string and make sure the pipe is continuing down in that hole. And again, the heavy equipment, the loud stuff is still going to be in the plant. After that 14-day window, which we're projecting August the 25th as a potential start date, but after that 14-day window, we're going to go back to the 7 to 7 schedule. And that's will not be a crucial path through the schedule and the rest of the park. So there will be restoration. We'll be pulling up mats and tying the pipe into that bore, but that'll be back to the normal schedule. And that'll be through October. And then we'll start demobbing and doing the final restoration and final inspections through October. And potentially November if depending on how the weather conditions are. So construction impacts and mitigations and items that we're going to do to extremely minimize the impacts. Like I said, the heavy equipment, the large, loud, and the bigger crews are in the plant, and they will remain there. The contractor is also utilizing solar-powered light plants, and we'll be focusing these light plants as best we can down the right-of-way and not facing away or facing into the homes, but again, centralizing that light as much as we can down the right-of-way. And those light plants don't make a sound, and they're used specifically for situations like this. Also, the crew is going to prepare towards the end of the day shift, try to lay out as much equipment and pipe as they can to minimize efforts at night that they have to move or track to make noise. This crew, along with those solar light plants, will have one 228 series Komatsu, which is a smaller to medium-sized excavator. And really, its goal is to pick up one pipe and hold it in place as that drill is pulled through until it gets to a point where you have to grab another rod or another drill string. And so it's just rotation mostly and very little tracking, so you're not going to hear the clunking of the tracks or the multiple trips back and forth. We also did some research and looked and found in OSHA you are allowed to disable the backup alarms, which are constantly heard and very much associated with construction work. But
That's
if you
the
have,
annoying thing.
yes, it is, and so we want to make sure we could minimize that. And we found if you have a full-time spotter, a dedicated spotter, you can disable that legally. And so we have had that, and we will continue to have a full-time spotter, vest, lights, and an alarming system in case there is a situation, but it's constant contact. And in this situation with only a three-person crew, and very localized area, we feel very comfortable disabling those devices. And anything that comes up, at which we've experienced many unplanned events, and the contractor's done a great job handling them and continuing to work on them. But if anything comes up, because we're boring underground, we've instructed the contractor, we will not add any equipment, we will not change our scope, we will not bring trucks in, we will not bring a bulldozer, we're not gonna add crew members until the next morning shift. If there's a situation that calls for continued bore or continued pulling, and we need miscellaneous equipment, we're gonna stop those operations until the next morning. And that's because we realize the impact, and we can't impact these crucial days, so we are gonna limit those activities. The other item, again, we did discuss, but I know we have a few more folks to catch face-to-face, and I've received one phone call today, and I think Ryan and Steve may have received one phone call as well, but I think as far as reaching out back to us, I haven't heard anything directly beyond those two. And we can certainly go and try to reach out to these additional people. But in conclusion, we understand the impacts to the residents, and we also understand the pressure that puts on the city. And it also puts pressure on us and our crews and our safety, and it's a decision that we didn't want to get to for many reasons, safety and impacts, and it's just not it's not a place that we wanted to make that decision, but we also want to get out of the project, finish it up, get out of the residents' hair and be finished. And so we understand as a company, we understand that, we also understand it as fellow homeowners and understand the fatigue that construction has on the community. So at this time, I can answer questions, or we can, if there's anything that you want clarified, I'd be glad to clarify.
Council members, any questions for Mr. Butler? Okay. Yeah, the only thing that I would say, Mr. Butler and Ms. Swanson, is that the more you communicate and you manage expectations, the better our experience is going to be, and the better it's going to be for the residents of Burnsville around Tennessee Park and around the project area. So I would say go over and above the contacts that you make, and give them information about how you're progressing and what it's going to mean to them for the next few days, how far you're going. I think the more we communicate, the better the experience is going to be, and it lessens the aggravation. So that's my counsel to all of you. If we're going to act on this, but to make this a successful experience and to move it forward, this is important for the region, because this power plant is not just serving Burnsville, it serves the region. And we're just privileged to have that asset in our community, and it has been a great partner. But when we have these kinds of projects, it has a direct impact on the quality of life. And for me, the better the communication and manage people's expectations and be kind, be compassionate, and caring to them, I think they'll probably be okay with the disruption of their sleep. How much of the pounding is going to be done at night?
There will not be any pounding at the exit pit.
Okay.
Again, all the power and all the strength and all the heavy equipment will be at the plant.
Yeah.
So it's going to be radio communication that continue, the rod is moving, we advance the rod, okay, put another rod on. So it's just, again, continuing that tail string back into the hole. And we've had, I think, about 50-plus crew members throughout the project. And in this location, we'll have 3 members. There'll be an operator, a spotter, and a laborer, basically maintaining operations and just communicating back to the main crew what's going on.
Yeah, and I think that's going to help, that you're going to disengage the signal, the backup signal, and that you're putting a full-time spotter in place. I think that's going to help a great deal, make sure that people know and answer any questions that they have.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Albrecht, I know you and I have sat down with some of the neighbors, and have they called you about this project and what's happening, if they have heard from Excel?
We've had pretty limited conversations at this point. We would expect, obviously, once they start to operate 24 hours a day, we will get some inquiries and additional calls about what's going on and why that's happening.
Yeah, and my hope is that we don't hear a whole lot, because you're going to do a really good job of communication.
Absolutely.
And do the hard thing first. Ms. Swanson? Yes, here is good.
So Mayor, council members, I just wanted to mention some of the
Yeah,
follow-up.
just give your name and address so people who are
Michelle
watching.
Swanson with Excel Energy. Is that enough?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to mention, we did provide some additional information to Ryan, I believe yesterday, and it was in your packets. But
Yeah.
one of the things we committed to in terms of getting toward your idea of more communication is, you know, we are asking for suspension for up to 14 days, you know, from the being able to work overnight. And because we don't know exactly what date that is, what we had suggested doing and sent to Ryan was to essentially send a letter to all those 32 residences that we went to basically say, we've gone to city council, they gave us this approval, we're gonna tell them we expect to start within the next, and I don't know how we'll frame it, but there's a little flexibility in terms of what actual date we'll start. And at the point that we start, that we are committed to basically being out of there within 14 days, because that's essentially what our request is. So that was our intent, to follow up yet again. And I was one of the folks who walked around door to door on Friday, along with one of the folks from our project team. And I was telling Heather, it was a really good exercise to go visit your customers. And that, I don't know if I'd want to do it every single day of my life, et cetera, but it was actually a good experience. And out of the 16 that were home, quite frankly, we had just more curiosity questions than anything. We had one individual who wasn't really thrilled with the idea, but we really didn't receive a lot of negative feedback. So, and I've documented every address that was home or wasn't home. So if we need to try and attempt to still contact those last 15 or 16 and catch them at home, I think we'd be willing to do that.
Please do.
Yes.
Please do.
Okay.
Yeah. I highly recommend that you do that and have face-to-face conversations. Be available to answer questions for them.
Right. That information will include contact information, which will be David, in case anyone has any questions, complaints, etc. Though I understand they are probably predispositioned to call the city as well, but we are providing contact information.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Councilmember Keeley.
Just, I really want to echo what you said, Madam Mayor. I think it's the right thing to do. I think people understand that there's necessities with utilities, and certain projects have to be completed. And there's, you know, ultimately, they're not going to like a noise disruption that would wake them. But if they felt like their voice was heard, if they felt you cared, if you felt you offered, you know, every possible chance to mitigate that noise level, you know, it's a little easier to get through it, as opposed to, you know, something happening and no one seemingly cares to listen to the disruption, right? And we care, obviously, and I think your presentation hit on a lot of things, that you're taking proactive steps to minimize it as much as humanly possible, or project possible. Sure. And so communication goes 100% of the distance in mitigating the problem, so thank you.
And Ms. Swanson, I have your phone number. Okay, thank you so much. If there are no other questions for Mr. Butler, then a motion is in order.
Move to approve as noted.
Councilmember Keeley makes the motion. Second by Councilmember Schultz. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. Good luck. And let's make sure that even though it's going to be a difficult experience for our residents, let's all work together, okay, to get through this in a very timely fashion so that they can get their quality of life back. Thank you. And members of the council, there are no other items to come before us this evening, and a motion to adjourn the council meeting is in order.
Move to adjourn?
Councilmember Gustafson makes the motion, second by Councilmember Keely. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign, and the motion carries. Now, I am going to convene the Burnsville Governance meeting, and this meeting is about an environmental scan regarding rental, short